Hey everyone, it is me again, your friendly neighborhood investor who has seen it all, or at least tried to see it all, and probably messed up a good few times along the way. Today, I want to share some stories, not of grand successes, but of grand learnings disguised as what some might call failures. For me, they were simply stepping stones, sometimes very slippery ones. That led me to where I am today. I am talking about 5 business ventures, 5 ideas that I poured my heart, time, and sometimes even a little bit of money into, only to see them not quite fly. But trust me, the lessons learned, those are priceless. They transformed my perspective on money, business, and even life itself. So let us dive into these adventures and see what wisdom we can uncover together. My first foray into the business world was an online fitness training company. This was back when I was in high school, a scrawny kid who loved working out. I had been consistently training since I was 13, and by 10th grade, I was already helping a few buddies with their routines for some lunch money. It felt like a natural progression. I was hugely inspired by YouTubers like Christian Guzman and Matt Ogus, the OGs of fitness content who were building their training empires. Their success fueled my teenage dreams. One day, when I was 15, I wanted to order a shirt from a big fitness personality, Nick Wright. He had a massive Facebook page, and I took a shot. Messaging him to ask if he would post a picture of me in his shirt, promoting my nascent fitness business. To my surprise, he said yes. The next morning, after sending him the picture, I woke up to an inbox full of 6 emails, all asking about my prices. This was before I even had a website or a domain or anything, really. I was just a kid with an idea. 2 people actually signed up, paying me about $150 each. I remember being in class, seeing that transaction come through and thinking, holy cow, this is actually a real thing. It was such a thrill, my first real taste of earning money from my own efforts. I genuinely felt like I was on to something, especially since the online fitness space had not exploded yet. However, in the months that followed, I made a classic mistake. Instead of focusing on getting more clients, on customer acquisition, I got caught up in all the superficial stuff. I spent money on business cards, t-shirts, a cool website, and even a logo that cost me $400, which looking back was completely absurd. My priority should have been outreach, talking to as many people as possible, and trying to get them as clients. But I was lazy and I did not know what I did not know. This is a common pitfall for many, myself included. In the beginning, nobody cares about your fancy logo or your perfectly designed website. They care about what you can do for them, what problem your service solves, and how it can benefit them right now. That was my first big lesson. Focus on the core value, not the window dressing. Business number 2 was an adventure into real estate wholesaling. This was summer 2015. I remember coming back from watching Terminator Genesis with my dad. School was out, and I was in that phase of staying up super late. Around 3:30 or 4 in the morning, a YouTube video popped up on my homepage. It was a guy named Ron Legrand talking about real estate wholesaling and how to turn a small amount of money into $10,000. It sounded almost too good to be true, and that is exactly what hooked me. I clicked and learned that wholesaling essentially involves finding undervalued distressed properties, getting them under contract, and then assigning that contract to another buyer in your network, for a profit, for example. If a seller wants 100 grand for a property, you find a buyer willing to pay 110, and you pocket the 10 grand difference as the middleman. It sounded simple enough, and inspired by his advice, I immediately jumped onto Craigslist and Kijiji trying to find deals. It sort of worked, but I quickly realized it was much harder than it seemed. I got incredibly close to 2 deals. One was for a multiplex, and I could have made 25 grand at just 17 years old, which was insane. I still have the contract for context, proving this was a real thing. The issue with that particular deal was the seller only spoke French, did not have a translator, and frankly did not like dealing with wholesalers. So, no matter how good my offer, it was a non-starter. My biggest takeaway from this venture was that I was always one step behind. The real estate market, even then, was incredibly competitive. Investors were like a pack of hyenas, pouncing on deals the moment they appeared. I was trying to be quick, but I was also still in school, juggling homework and classes. I remember spending my designated homework class every day for months, sending outreach messages, trying to connect buyers and sellers. It was relentless. Ultimately, I think I was just too late to the game, especially in terms of networking and being lightning. Fast looking back, real estate wholesaling has blown up even more since 2015, making it even funnier to reflect on my early attempts. My third business attempt was a mix of private equity deal sourcing and partnering with investors. Initially, I tried to connect with people who had capital, say $20,000 to a couple $100,000 from a real estate sale, and wanted to invest in businesses. They were looking for someone to do the legwork, which would be me. In exchange for a minority stake or a 50 to 50 Pascal's partnership, I actually had a lot of interest. I met with one older Indian gentleman, perhaps in his 40s, who had a very good job in liquid cash. I drove about an hour in my dad's car, lying that I was meeting friends at a coffee shop. This was pre-car trackers. Thankfully, when I met him, he was quite shocked at how young I looked, remarking that I sounded much older on the phone. At this point, I had already gained some confidence from cold calling during my real estate wholesaling days, so I felt somewhat prepared. He asked about my job and schooling, and seemed genuinely surprised by my confidence despite my age. He even showed me his bank account and was keen on doing a deal. I tried to find businesses for sale online and offline, but it never materialized. The main reason, I believe, was trust. Nobody is going to trust a 17-year-old kid with running a business, even if it is an established one. I had no track record, no experience, and frankly, thank goodness, nobody did. There's so much more that goes into running a business than just buying it. So I pivoted to private equity deal sourcing, where I would find companies for sale and match them with full-time buyers, capital owners. I cold called every single private equity firm in North America, scouring websites like BizBuySell, Flippa, and Empire Flippers for deals. The recurring problem was that I was not sourcing proprietary deals. Everyone was looking at the same listings. I even went as far as cold calling and cold emailing businesses directly, asking if they would ever be interested in selling. I still think there is a huge business opportunity there, as Alex Hormozi often talks about. The intermediary fees, based on the Lehman formula, were substantial, making this an incredibly appealing prospect. I learned an immense amount from this experience, arguably more than any other I was talking to. Very high-level people, VPs at firms with hundreds of millions in capital. It was an intense, eye-opening experience that happened right before I got my first proper job. My fourth business attempt was a broad social media marketing agency, or SMMA. This company offered live chat support, lead generation, and social media marketing. Their compensation plan was wildly lucrative, almost too good to be true. It was commission only, and if you brought in a $2,000 a month client, you would get the first and last month fees up front, totaling $4,000. It felt like a Wolf of Wall Street moment. I became known as the Reddit guy because I was messaging business owners on Reddit to find clients. I actually landed a client who onboarded at $850 a month, which meant a commission check of $1,700. I remember getting that first check right before they changed the compensation plan, realizing it was unsustainable. It felt like an incredible opportunity, but ultimately, it failed. My cold emailing skills were not refined enough, and we were essentially left to fend for ourselves. It was a tough learning curve, and while the potential was there, the execution proved to be difficult without proper support or training. The fifth and final venture I want to talk about, and arguably my closest to real success, was a tech startup. This was in March or April of 2021 during the peak of the market, and when everyone was heavily into video games. I was at a point in my full-time job where I could finish 8 hours of work in 5. I knew I was hyper-efficient, but I also saw the writing on the wall for that startup, which eventually shut down at the end of 2021. I knew I needed to start something myself, but I was overcomplicating things. I wanted to do something in the tech or startup world because it seemed flashy and exciting from the outside. I connected with a guy from the Netherlands on Reddit, and we started working on a software product. The closest competitor was Streamly, a company based in Poland that offered small, movable banner ads within live streams. The idea was that micro streamers could get paid without disrupting the viewer experience with long ad breaks. It was just a simple line of code that could place an ad anywhere on the screen. I was incredibly excited, thinking this was a win-win for everyone. Better viewer experience, more money for advertisers, and income for micro streamers who had not yet qualified for Twitch partner programs. We built a prototype, and having learned from my previous mistakes, I focused entirely on sales. I became the head of sales, doing as much outreach as humanly possible. However, the biggest hurdle was that it was a marketplace business. Marketplaces, while potentially lucrative, are incredibly difficult to start, especially as a first venture. It is the classic chicken and egg problem. You need buyers to attract sellers and sellers to attract buyers. I started by reaching out to thousands of streamers on Reddit, asking if they would be interested. We received an overwhelmingly positive response. The challenge was that many of these streamers had only a handful of viewers, which was not enough to make the ad model viable. We needed a minimum of 20 to 25 consecutive viewers to consider them micro. The next step was reaching out to brands, as no one was paying us yet. We garnered significant interest from small and medium-sized businesses, and even had talks with big names like Corsair, Razer, and ExpressVPN. Our first customer came from Reddit, a non-copyright music platform which was perfect for streamers who needed to avoid copyright strikes on Twitch. They paid us $500. My partner and I looked at each other, scratching our heads, wondering how the economics would ever work. We were taking a percentage of a percentage, and our cut was so tiny. We realized the only way this could be sustainable was if we charged brands a minimum of $5,000 a month to work with us, to even make a decent profit. This realization was incredibly demotivating. We worked on it for about 6 months, shutting it down before November of that year. We had made some money and ended things amicably, but it was just too tough to scale. So, after all these attempts, all these failures, it was ultimately one service-based business that truly took off for me, the one that made a significant difference. That is why I always recommend starting with a sales or service-based business in this day and age. It is the most direct way to get started, to learn, and to generate revenue. Once you have that foundation, then you can pursue your moonshot ideas. Your big ventures. Do not be like me and jump into complex, capital-intensive ideas without the foundational experience. It is easy to label these experiences as failures, but they are not. They are lessons. Every single one of these moments, every misstep, every challenge led me to this exact point in my life. I would not change a thing. I have no regrets about any of these projects because they collectively taught me invaluable lessons about business, resilience, and myself. If you have made it this far, I genuinely want to see you succeed. Share in the comments below maybe a business you tried that did not quite work out or an investment that taught you a hard lesson. I am genuinely interested in hearing your stories. And remember, every experience, good or bad, contributes to your growth. We will see you in the next one.